Welcome to the Christian Church Leadership Network's Next Steps Guide for Ministers. I'm Sean McMullen, and for the last several sessions and for a few more to come, we're talking here about the relationship between prayer and our pursuit of holiness. In the sessions that have come before this one, we've talked a little bit about the place of prayer in our pursuit of holiness. The session just prior to this session, we talked about the purpose of prayer in our pursuit of holiness. And in this particular session, I'd like for us to think for a few moments about the place of prayer in our pursuit of holiness. And what I mean by that today is that I would like for us to consider the priority role that prayer plays in not just our pursuit of holiness, but in all our lives. So we're going to start today by looking at prayer as the priority Christ has called it to be in our lives. And then we'll continue this discussion by thinking about ways that we can make prayer a priority so that that prayer can enhance our personal pursuit of holiness. So I'd like us to begin today by thinking about the priority of prayer in the mind of Christ himself as he walked this earth. Early in the Gospel of Mark gives us, I think, a fascinating glimpse into a day in the life of Jesus Christ. This is in Mark, the very first chapter, in fact. It tells us that after Christ had called his first disciples, he led them to a village called Capernaum, and it was a Sabbath day, and as was Jesus' normal custom, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and there he was asked to stand and speak. While he was there and speaking in the synagogue on that Sabbath, Mark tells us a demon-possessed man interrupted Jesus' teaching, disrupted the service. Jesus responded to that disruption by casting the evil spirit out of that man. They then left the synagogue and went together to the home of Simon and Andrew, and there was Simon's mother-in-law, who was in bed, sick with a fever. Mark tells us that Jesus went to Simon's mother-in-law. He took her by the hand, helped her out of bed. She was healed immediately, and then she set about serving Jesus and those who were with him. Now, apparently, the word of that healing spread very quickly, because that same day, in the evening, the night of that very same day, Mark tells us that all the town folks gathered outside the home where Jesus was staying. They brought their sick, their demon-possessed, so that Jesus would heal them, just as he had healed Simon's mother-in-law. So Jesus has already had a very busy day. He teaches in the synagogue, heals a man of an evil spirit, travels some distance, at least, to the home of Simon, finds his mother-in-law there, heals her, and then later that same day, as it grew toward evening, as it began to get dark, the entire town showed up outside of this home, wanting Jesus to heal their sick and cast demons out of those who were demon-possessed. Now, this marathon healing session didn't begin, you'll notice, until after the sun had set. So we can assume that Jesus ministered to this community into the wee hours of the morning. Already a long day. Now he's working into the very early hours of the morning. So that sort of leads to a question then. What did Jesus do once the last sick person had been made well and the last demon-possessed person had been freed from oppression? What did Jesus do after all that? We might have expected him to catch up on the hours of sleep that he had missed. You know, it'd been a long day again. Jesus had worked long into the night. No one would have criticized him for sleeping in, for giving his earthly body some much-needed rest. But Jesus didn't do that. Instead, Mark says, and I quote, "Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed." It seems then that Jesus stayed in that mode of prayer and in that place of prayer so long that finally his disciples came looking for him. Now, isn't that remarkable when you think about it? I mean, for all his divinity, for all of his godness, Jesus was still a man. He was subject to the same fatigue you and I experience. Yet even after a long and demanding day of ministry, Jesus ignored the frailties of the human body, neglecting rest so that he could spend precious time alone with his Father. Now, you and I all need the kind of balance rest brings to our lives and our ministries. And this incident in Jesus' life is not designed to give us permission to abuse our bodies or neglect needed rest, but it does teach us that there are occasions that warrant setting aside our normal routine for a greater purpose. And it underscores the priority Jesus Christ placed on prayer. Prayer was certainly a priority to Jesus, and it ought to be a priority to us as well. It was also a priority to the apostles. Remember this in the book of Acts, chapter 6, the young church was growing rapidly. Good things were happening, but sometimes, as we all probably have come to know, growth outpaces infrastructure. And as the church continued to expand, that early church, some of the widows under the care of the church were being neglected. The apostles recognized that need, but instead of handling that need themselves, they delegated that need, the distribution of food, to others. Their reasoning? We will turn this responsibility over to them, and we'll give our attention to prayer and the ministry of the word. The church was facing a real problem here. The needs were legitimate, but nothing would deter the apostles from the priorities of prayer and the ministry of the word. That, I think, helps us realize that prayer is a priority for all of us. It is an act of communion, and it really is one of the deepest expressions of our personal relationship with God. In a very real sense, prayer is an act of obedience. We're commanded to do it. Paul tells us in 1 Thessalonians 5 to pray continually. In Philippians chapter 4, he tells us, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Think about the parables Jesus taught, such as the one he taught in Luke 18, designed to show the disciples that they should always pray and not give up. So we will continue to explore the relationship between prayer and personal holiness in this series. But for now, let's pause just long enough to recognize that prayer is a priority. It was a priority to Jesus. It was a priority to the apostles. It's been a priority throughout the history of the church. As long as God has had a people, those people have been a praying people. And it is a priority to us as well.